Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Esop Sofa, Lockdown Stories. My name is Ian Harris. I'm one of the directors of Young Group, who operate the Esop Centre. And those of you who've seen me at a webinar before, or perhaps used to seeing me sitting on a regular chair. I don't actually have a sofa in my man cave, but I have gone for a throne instead. I did think about calling the man cave the throne room, but apparently that would just add to the confusion rather than solve the confusion. So, so here we are, and we are delighted to welcome today Laura McNeil and Kevin Lim, who are going to be talking us through their lockdown stories and how they are adapting to business life during the pandemic. And particularly Laura is the focus of the show, who will be interviewed by Kevin. Laura is the Assistant Company Secretary and runs the international share plans at Blue Prism Group PLC. And she has some fascinating things to say, both about how lockdown is affecting the business life of people at Blue Prism, and also about their employee share plans. Kevin Lim is the Business Development Manager at Investec, who's engaged in selling VuLife platform share plans. And he is also someone who's very heavily involved with the Esop Centre. My role in all of this is largely to get out of the way, actually. So here's the agenda for the day. Chairman's introduction. I hope it's not going to take as much as 5 minutes because I'm almost done. Then Kevin will chat with Laura for about 25 minutes or so. And during that time, what we would really like you to do is to send in your questions or comments on the discussion. And the way to do that is through the questions button on the GoToWebinar platform. Please do not try to find my email address or Kevin's or Laura's email addresses and send us emails. We would get them, but we would get them after the webinar. The way we'll get your questions during the webinar is if you use the GoToWebinar platform. I'm hoping we will be able to get through all of the questions and comments today, but if there are more of them than we can handle, between the three of us, we will get back to you with responses to any questions and comments that you send in that are unanswered. And that interactive part of the session, I'm hoping is going to be a very interesting part. We're hoping to wrap up within 45 minutes or so, and that's basically the agenda for the day. Just before we start the webinar, I would like to say a word of thanks to the Financial Services Club members and sponsors who are listed here. It is through because many of you are here today, or their generosity and forbearance that we're able to offer this wide range of webinars through Zien and through this GoToWebinar program that we've been running. And over the last few months, we've been running 4 or 5 a week. We'll be doing slightly fewer during August, and then we'll be doing 4 or 5 a week again from September onwards through the autumn. And it really is thanks to these wonderful members and sponsors that we are able to do that. Similarly, specifically around the Esop Centre area of interest, this is a list of all of the members and sponsors of the Esop Centre. And similarly, it is really through your generosity and forbearance that we're able to do this program. We're getting very good feedback on it, so I'm hoping that that you are finding it very effective. Enough from me for now. Over to Laura and Kevin.
So thank you very much, Ian, for that wonderful introduction. So I'm Kevin Lim, and hopefully I've met most people here. Otherwise, please feel free to give me a call because I'm always ready and up for a chat. Just want to say, because it's a live broadcast, there may be interruptions. So I have locked the family in the basement. The dog hopefully is not marauding around, but my neighbors have had a couple of kittens during lockdown, and they've now taken to just climbing up on the wall, just flicking V signs at my dog, who goes absolutely batshit crazy. So if there is barking, I apologize in advance. But no, I'm going to be introducing the wonderful Laura McNeil. But really, when we first mooted this kind of discussion, we had just started lockdown, and things seemed really, really bleak, and really, times were incredibly uncertain. And certainly from my perspective, just wondering how life would return to normal. We met up, I suppose, slightly over a week ago, just to kind of catch up and discuss about what we were going to be talking about. And we're thinking, blimey, things kind of seem to have kind of aged a bit. But a week later, the Philippines, 10 million people are in lockdown again. In Melbourne, there's another lockdown, and people are kind of getting a little bit angry about that. Even in the UK, Manchester, Leicester, is kind of, easing has kind of stopped again. So I suppose in these uncertain times again, I'll be asking Laura hopefully some quite gentle questions about, kind of life, work, and her thoughts kind of going forward. So I suppose, kind of, Laura, if you could just, tell us a little bit about yourself, and also what you do at Blue Prism, and really what Blue Prism does. So kind of over to you.
Yeah, sure. So as Ian said, I am the Assistant Company Secretary and International Share Plans Manager at Blue Prism. So I've held a number of COSEC roles in both FTSE 250 and AIM-listed companies. And this year I was listed on DMJ and Computer Shares Governance Top 100 in the Innovator category, which was really, really cool. So the reason for that is it's due to the work that I've done internally on automating some of our share plans administration. What we've done is we've used our own software, so Blue Prism is an automation company, and I'll come on to that in a second. So we've used our own software to help us draft our deeds of grant, our share award certificates, and upload the awards to our share plans platform, which is actually provided by Kevin and the team that work with him at Investec. So we've worked very closely with them over the last few years to work on integrating that. A little bit about Blue Prism. So Blue Prism is a robot process automation company. So RPA is software that can be taught how to do basic administrative tasks. This just means that employees can utilize the software to automate the more repetitive parts of their role, and it just frees up time to do more complex strategic tasks that simply you might not have had time for before. In our COSEC team, we are, like most COSEC teams, we're quite small and lean, and because of that, and because of, quite frankly, the sheer vast amount of administration that Blue Prism does in terms of their share plan, as most share plans do, then the ability for us to automate the share award certificates, the deeds of grant, and again the upload to the platform, it saved us. I think in the first run we saved 72 hours, and in the most recent one we did, which is only a small one, we saved about 50 hours. So for us, really, it's been invaluable using this software, using our own software. Really, we couldn't exactly ask our clients to be using our software and promote our software if we weren't doing it internally. So I'm definitely an RPA convert now.
Fantastic. So, I mean, just to delve a little bit more into this RPA bit, because I think you're being a little bit modest here. I'm now talking through kind of the manual steps you would have had to do previously. So we're talking about obviously taking a participant's data, creating an award certificate, PDFing that award certificate, saving that to a directory drive, opening up an email, appending that to an email, and sending it through. And we're talking that a digital bot does all that now that it's been programmed. Is that correct?
Yeah, so actually, in addition to that, so Blue Prism, we offer shares. We make an award of free shares to all employees every single year. So we're at the point where we've now got over 1,000 employees in around about, I think it's about 17 countries now. So every January, we were in the position where we were going to have to draft 1,000 share certificates, 15, 16, 17, however many countries worth of deeds of grant. And obviously make sure that that is all correct and you know, as accurate as it could possibly be. So for us, automation, it's been fantastic for me, because it means I don't spend hours and hours copying and pasting, which is, you know, really boring. But also I can be confident in the accuracy. So as long as the spreadsheet that we put the data in is correct, as long as that is correct, then that data will be reflected in the deed of grant, and again in the share award certificate. So we know, as long as we've checked one source of data, we know that that will be replicated sort of throughout the rest of the document.
Brilliant. No, thank you for clarifying. So as a result of lockdown, you know, how has your job changed then?
I think for us at Blue Prism, actually, there maybe wasn't as much change as there were in other companies. We already had a hybrid kind of in and out of office role, so at Blue Prism, it's very flexible. I tended to do 1 or maybe 2 days a week based from home anyway. So we were very lucky when everyone else was scrambling around to get laptops, to set up IT infrastructure. I was actually already working from home, so we actually, our office is shut just before the actual lockdown was announced by Boris. So it was the week before the lockdown was announced, and I was working from home one day, and then there was an announcement to say the offices were going to be closed and everyone's going to work from home. And so I just got off the next day and carried on. So from a logistical perspective, we were actually very lucky, and I think our company has seen the benefits of already operating that flexible working model, which a lot of other companies maybe haven't moved to quite yet. So for us, there was virtually no interruption to productivity levels pretty much across the business. So from a logistics point of view, that was great. Certainly, I would say since the actual office has shut, we have had to do a lot more creative problem solving. So lots of the issues or hurdles that are occurring at the moment, we don't actually have an answer or a precedent for. So there are situations that are happening that, you know, that there is no way around them, or it's a case of we've never seen anything like this before, and we're having to work out solutions based on the data we have at the time and what's available at the time, but also being very aware that the position could change the next day. So, for example, on the COSEC side of my role, we had to be very creative around our AGM, because we were very lucky we managed to squeeze this in just as everything was locking down. So we had to do a couple of venue changes, a couple of, you know, we had to have people holding signs and directing people to the right venue. We had to get a webinar going so that we gave shareholders the opportunity to dial in as well. And I think, I don't know if anyone else has found this, but we have certainly found that very, very simple tasks have become so much more complicated and are taking up so much more time. One particular example, I don't know if any of you have any involvement with India here. India is not the only country that does this, but lots of countries require an actual wet signature, whereas, you know, if you use DocuSign, which is valid and legal in the UK, it's very, very easy to get those documents sorted. Whereas we really struggled where we had to get actual wet signatures, because obviously then someone has to have access to a printer, you have to get couriers involved, something that would before have been a 2-minute job, it has ended up taking almost half a day. And for me, I've certainly found that I've definitely had to be more proactive. I've had to anticipate the problems that might arise and you know, in order to find creative solutions, because we've simply never had a situation before where everybody's been at home and you know, been unable to access the things that are based in the office that you take for granted, you know, like the printing, like couriers. And another one for us was notaries. so getting any document notarized or apostilled. That has been it's been a bit more of a challenge. I think you have to just think things through a little bit more than maybe you did before.
Oh, I can imagine, yeah, the simple things are such a nightmare. I agree. I mean, I probably have saved a whole rainforest worth of paper because the default is obviously always to kind of print things out, and actually you've got to think, no, using a couple of screens and just adapting without. No, that's a really, really good point. So just going on to, I suppose, the Blue Prism share plans. Can you just provide some more detail on how kind of share plan participants have kind of been impacted as a result of this? Kind of the COVID-19, anything from that perspective you can give some insight on?
Yeah, sure. So we had a vesting of shares covering 212 participants in July from various different countries, and we actually did a grant of a further 300 participants. Both events remotely actually ran very smoothly, and we realised it didn't actually impact us for those two particular events, not being in the office. Normally I'm very insistent on myself and the other members of the team, being physically present. And now actually it's good in a way because it's made me question why I thought that was necessary and what other events might actually be easier to run from home, especially if you are working longer hours. With a challenge that we did have with the vesting, and I know this might have been something that's impacted some other people on the call. So at Blue Prism, we had very, very few furloughed staff. I think we had about 6 of our staff had been furloughed, which was, not a lot at all in comparison to lots of other companies. But that proved quite a challenge for us because it made it a lot more difficult for us to communicate with these staff about the upcoming vesting. For us, we rely very heavily on email, which obviously furloughed employees weren't able to access. But we did have a bit of a solution in place that we just took a solution that we used for anybody who's on long-term sick leave or maternity leave or, isn't in the office or not accessing email. We just adapted a solution we already had and used that to communicate with our furloughed staff. And luckily, because we already had those templates, it was a fairly easy process for us. We were obviously very concerned at the start of lockdown to do with the uncertainty regarding tax advantage plans. So, for example, we had a couple of concerns about EMI options that I know have now been thankfully clarified by HMRC. But I think that uncertainty was kind of, it was present for a while whilst, HMRC were obviously working through other issues. So we're very glad that we've had that clarified. Another issue we've had, which I don't know if anyone else has experienced, but we have a number of employees who had opted for paper share certificates, and then because of the lockdown, because maybe their financial situation had changed, we had a few individuals who were in the position where they wanted to sell and realise the cash very quickly, and were finding that very difficult. We have one employee in the US who's actually still struggling with this, as a lot of places were unable to accept share certificates as their offices are closed, so they can't access post, or it's being processed at a much slower rate, which obviously slows down the transaction. I think a lot of people have maybe found that a little bit frustrating, and I certainly found it frustrating as in my role as managing the share plans, because you really want to help solve the problem for the employee, but all you can do in those circumstances is then really to manage expectations. If the companies, the brokers are unable to process the share certificates, then there is nothing that we could do at that time. But there's also been some positives. And so one real positive that we had was to do with our ESPP that we operate in the US. So we had a group of participants where we had a purchase in March. So they got Blue Prism shares for an absolute bargain price of, it's around about £6 a share. And just for context, so our shares are trading at the moment around about £12. And the high in the last 12 months has been about £17. So those individuals have really, really got the benefit out of the ESPP. Again, with the SIP, there have been some benefits for a few of the purchases. But obviously, I'm also conscious that the share price has to recover in order for that gain to be realised. And for some businesses, I mean, Blue Prism, we've been quite lucky in that our share price has bounced back a little bit. Other companies, I'm quite realistic in that it may take a little while for that to occur.
No, fantastic. So I suppose we've talked, obviously, how you've been working as, as part of the share plan and running the share plan kind of from home. So learning lessons on lockdown, what would you do differently now compared to then? I know that's a kind of very kind of broad ranging question, and it's easy for me to ask, but, obviously harder for you to answer, kind of what do you think?
Yes. I think what's difficult with learning lessons on lockdown is that we're still in it. And so I don't think until this kind of crisis period has passed, I don't think it's possible to accurately reflect and say, these are the things I learned, because, I'm very conscious that we're still very much in the middle of this. For me, there are kind of two key points that I think that I've definitely learned. So the first thing is about prioritising work-life balance. I think because this has been a crisis that's been going on for a number of months now, I think we almost forget that that's what we're living through. We are living through a crisis, and we're enduring all of that stress and that disruption and change. But then we're all still trying to work as well, and we're all still trying to be as productive as we would be on a normal day. For me personally, during lockdown, I had a couple of days off already booked, and I just chose to keep those days. I mean, we couldn't do anything, obviously. It was just a few days away from work, and for me, it was hugely beneficial to my productivity, as I had the time to wind down, I had the time to just relax a little bit, rather than feeling constantly on edge with the pace of change. And for me, that was incredibly helpful, and that's something that I would like to take forward, because it's made me realise about how much more productive I am when I make sure that I do keep my stress levels under control. The second thing that I thought was fairly important to me, and has helped a lot with problem solving, is when we're dealing with an issue, and because the issues we're dealing with, again, there's no precedent for these. They're often very unusual one-off situations during lockdown. It is all about going back to basics. So don't worry that you're not following the precedent or the process that you've honed over a number of years, and that you've got documented down and has all these different controls in to prevent things going wrong. Don't panic. If you can't do that, the process exactly the same as you did last time, maybe prioritise and think more about what the actual outcomes are, what you're trying to achieve, and work backwards from there. We all love to follow best practice, and and I am very much an advocate of that. But I think during this time, we maybe have to make allowances and ensure that we're getting things done, ensure that we're achieving goals and keeping things moving. Just in the meantime, really.
Yeah, that's very insightful. I must agree, because we, as an office at Investec, I think there were 1,500 people in 2 buildings, and at the height of lockdown, I think we'd reduced it to approximately 30 staff who were required essentially to be in the office, which is basically people like in the custody team to receive share certificates and such like. Now, kind of trying to get back into the office, it's kind of 2 separate schools of thought. There are the people who are going, I really don't want to commute because I'm saving so much time by being able to work. Whereas I suppose the younger generation who are living in shared houses and not fortunate enough to, have a nice kind of office environment, they're just, I suppose, wanting to have that stability of having an office environment and being able to separate home and life. And I think early on, not knowing when lockdown was going to end, I thought I just camped on the dining table and annoyed the rest of the family with my phone calls. But I then kind of moved into my I suppose my my home office, or the kind of the family outside garden room. I'm not allowed to call it a man cave because that's not it should be a person cave or something like that. Sorry, Ian. And you know, that emphasized the separation between kind of work life and home life. Otherwise, you know, it's kind of really easy to just have that computer up, and you can not just, you know, you're almost tempted to look at it rather than be quite disciplined and say, right, my work day has ended. I'm just going to you know, give it my full concentration to do my home life. But in a way, for me, when it was in lockdown, and I'm sure, you know, you alluded to it, being able to work was kind of my way of kind of being in control of the situation. And now, you know, with that kind of the mental health point, just making sure you just separate the two is very, very important. So I suppose I'm slightly aware of the time, and Ian's popped up again. Can I just ask thoughts on the future in terms of, you know, how you see your work going forwards in terms of the share plans and your COSEC work, how you're dealing with participants? Is, you know, how do you see that changing in a way, if any?
Yeah, so I struggle with this question a little bit, because the way I see it is the future is going to be full of extremes. So I do think it's going to be a difficult time, certainly in lots of other companies. Luckily in technology, I think we're fairly robust, but I know lots of other sectors will have issues with redundancies, and that will obviously have a knock-on impact on share plans and things. But I'm conscious that not only are we dealing with COVID, but we still have the looming impact of Brexit to deal with. So we have kind of two fairly chunky issues that we're going to be dealing with at the same time. I think the challenge, certainly in companies, you know, with share plans, is going to be that some companies will view them as an expensive luxury, and others will view share plans as a strategic tool. And I do anticipate that as a profession, we'll have to work a lot harder to maybe justify the added value of share plans in certain organisations, depending on how the executive team perceive the share plans. So I think that will be a challenge that we'll have to face. But also, if we do have any changes to legislation, I know there are some potential changes to tax rates that will have an impact on you know, on share plans, such as, you know, the EMI options. So I think I hate to use the cliched phrases, but I do think that the only constant is change. And so as share plans professionals, I think we're going to be even more need to be up to date with as much as we possibly can. I do also think, I mean, I don't want to dwell too much on, you know, negatives, but I also think this will be a time that could provide some significant opportunity in terms of the share plans world. So and I know I talked about earlier that we've done some automation. In our company, we have certainly seen quite a few of our clients accelerate their automation plans. So lots of companies already had it on the agenda. And I think COVID has increased the urgency to implement this in some companies, which is great news. You know, purely because it will free up us to, you know, as humans, to do the more interesting, fun parts of our job. For me personally, the bit that I'm most optimistic about is the cultural change in how we approach work. So that move from no longer expecting to be at your desk on specific, you know, 9 to 5 every day. We can already see those changes happening, and many more companies are becoming open to the possibility of working from home when that was never a reality before. In addition to that, I'm really excited to see a shift away from what I kind of think of as presenteeism. And I hope presenteeism is becoming a thing of the past. So, you know, that working culture where, you know, people would stay late and the CEO would walk around the office at, you know, 6:30, 7 o'clock at night and see who's still there. I'm hoping that we will shift away from that into a working culture that values and promotes output. And I think that will, as well as having an impact on everybody in terms of their work-life balance and their stress levels, I think it will have an impact in particular on women who have either elder care or childcare responsibilities. You know, they're the individuals who could be putting in, you know, a fantastic job, getting some brilliant outputs, but because they're having to come into the office as late as possible and leave as early as possible, maybe the perception is there that they maybe don't work as hard. And I'm hoping that we'll move away from that, and I think that will be beneficial for us all.
No, those are really, really good thoughts, and I do agree. I'd also add in, you know, unnecessary meetings as a result of us being in disparate locations. You know, the amount of unnecessary meetings has just given me so much more time back. Obviously, working with colleagues who you know quite well, it's quite easy to then, you know, be able to, if you know them well, you can approach them just by, you know, sending a chat message, or just you know, trying to call them up directly, rather than the formality of sending them an email saying, are you going to be free at 3 o'clock so I can contact you? You know, these are just those little kind of things about, you know, how to interact with people, which I've learned to navigate over the last few months, and I'm sure you've
definitely
found that.
Yeah. Not just that, Kevin, but I would say that instead of having, you know, larger, so meetings where people have to be physically present, and they're a lot longer. I don't know if this is something that either Kevin or you, Ian, have experienced, but we've been having a lot more frequent meetings and shorter meetings. And for us, it's enabled us to be a lot more dynamic and make decisions at a sharper pace. You know, rather than wait until next month till everyone can congregate, we can have a short half-hour meeting, you know, in 2 days' time, make the decision, and then things are implemented.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. We've also been finding not excuses, but more or less excuses to have short, frequent meetings just to avoid the risks of cabin fever. And one of the things that I talk about in my paper on the Zien blog about this, because I've been effectively home working for 25 years, and Zien was set up on the basis that it was flexible working, and some people work from the office and some people work from home. So we're slightly unusual in that regard. And one of the things we experienced very early in the life of Zien was this concept of cabin fever. And I found myself getting faintly irritated by articles in the newspapers about, so, oh, look, you know, I'm now an expert on home working because I've been doing it for 5 minutes. And, oh, gosh, some people have got cabin fever. I thought, oh, actually, we did this a long time ago. And there are things that you can do to help people to avoid that. One question that I would like to ask both of you, I've got several really good questions have come in, by the way, but one of the huge benefits of being the host is that it's up to me to choose the questions and the sequence of answers. So my first question is from Ian in West London, and Ian in West London would like to know, just really trawling the psychological side of the ways of people working changing, and also thinking about employee share ownership. One of the things in the back of my mind is the companies that embrace employee share ownership are making more of a community of themselves through the very way that the company is owned and managed. You know, it's a very holistic approach to, we are all part of something if you're a member of this company. And I just wonder whether at that psychological side that employee share ownership is going to have a psychological edge over more traditional methods of ownership, and whether actually this world that we are entering, where I think more and more people will work remotely and fewer people will, you know, gather, particularly office workers, gather in large workplaces all the time, whether employee share ownership will give businesses an edge through that sort of psychological and sociological medium. What do you both think of that?
I'll let you have a go, Laura, first. Give me time to think.
I've worked at a number of companies before, and I've never worked at a company like Blue Prism that had a share plan that gave, not, you know, didn't ask the employees if they wanted to purchase, but they actually give Blue Prism employees shares every single year. So I get a grant of shares in you know, in Blue Prism every year, and for me, I would, from a personal level, I would agree. It makes me feel more bonded to the company. I can imagine, say, for example, if an employee becomes a little bit disillusioned, is a little bit disconnected from the company, which I think is a lot easier to do if you don't have that office community environment. I can imagine that if you are an owner of some shares, if you feel like you have that stake and that connection to the business, that you care more. I mean, I certainly care more about what my company is doing based on the fact that I'm a shareholder in the company, and I have those rights. I think for the company, it makes it very easy to engage with employees. So we engage with employees anyway, but I think the dual aspect of, if your board of directors say, well, we have a big pool of employees here, but also 80% of those employees are also shareholders. From a corporate governance perspective, it makes it doubly important that group of people is engaged with, and so I'm hoping that it should really encourage the directors to build that relationship, which I think in turn will benefit employees because their views will be heard, and it will. I personally think it strengthens the employee voice, but I don't know, Kevin, if you have any ideas on that.
So I'm going to answer it slightly differently, Ian and Laura. During this lockdown period, we've seen obviously companies in the leisure and travel sector and all that, we don't hear from them. But anything with the words pharma or medical in them, they're going absolutely great guns, and they're stuffed full of cash. The share price has been doing really well, and they've been thinking about making new awards or putting in new plans. Also, very successful companies have been things like power storage and kind of alternative energy, like hydrogen power. They've been doing really, really well. And from that perspective, they have been kind of making grants to employees and really, decision making and putting into place new arrangements. They've been taking advantage of the situation because business has never been any better. Quite interestingly, we've only come across one situation where a company's reduced director salaries by a certain percentage and replaced that with kind of monthly share reward grants. So I suppose I'd call it kind of double dipping in a way, because invariably if the share price is low, it's going to go up, but they're kind of foregoing a little bit of cash. And I suppose it brings me forward to, as part of where I work, we're part of the corporate broking team, and in April, May, June, a lot of companies were in either cash saving or fundraising mode to just make sure they had a war chest to see them through these next few months. So kind of going forwards, it should be kind of quite interesting to see what happens in terms of, kind of merger activity or such like going forwards. Because I think, as Laura mentioned, once we see the shock of Brexit or furlough ending, what companies are going to be doing is an interesting time, should I say? Yeah.
Thank you both for that answer. I've got some questions from the audience that I really want to get through. Now, the first I'd like to ask is actually a two-part question from Bob McDowell. He comments that the outlook for some companies, particularly in certain sectors like leisure and hospitality and travel and retail, are very uncertain at the moment, whether they're large or small companies. How should employees in companies like that view share participation in these uncertain times? And the second part to his question is, do we believe that the UK government should be providing some sort of remedial support to employee share plans at a time like this? So I'd quite like both of your reflections on that that comment and that tough question.
Okay, so certainly on the first part, I think depending on the company that you're in will depend on how your share plans are viewed. So like I said before, some boards will view share plans as an expensive luxury. For me personally, I think I would like to think executives and board members more than ever before are recognising the potential value of share plans to employees. And for lots of companies at the moment, as we've all alluded to, because conserving cash is key right now, I do think that a lot of companies will be considering how they can utilise their share plans to ensure that employees feel valued without the cash outlay that you would have if you gave people pay rises or bonuses or whatever. As a company, we're not necessarily making any changes ourselves at the moment, but I do think it's something that we have discussed that in that we're in a position where as a company we very much want to conserve cash like everybody else, but at the same time we released our half-year results not that long ago, and they were on track or slightly ahead of expectation. Now, how can you turn around to your employees if we get to sort of the end of our full year? How could we turn around to our employees and say nobody's getting a bonus or nobody's getting a pay rise when actually we've achieved everything we set out to? So for me, one way that companies can ensure that employees feel valued is by utilising their share plans, and that will be a way that you can ensure that you're maintaining and retaining your talent, which is still crucial, at this moment in time, and you're continuing to motivate your employees as well.
Kevin?
From my perspective, in terms of companies in the, shall I say, less who have been impacted more by COVID-19, we've come across quite a lot of companies funding their trusts to acquire shares to satisfy future awards. So they know the share price is low, so they are, I suppose, anticipating that by buying shares now is going to serve them in good stead going forwards. And really, I can only think of two companies in kind of leisure retail area who have been making grants as usual, and those guys, if the companies kind of survive for the next 3 years, they should be looking at very, very healthy gains. So it's a case of balancing whether or not the company is looking to just go into preservation mode, which a lot of people are, because there are a lot of companies who've just said, especially like the oil exploration, oil and gas, the more, I suppose, the upstream people, they've basically kicked a lot of their share plan arrangements or what they're looking to do into the long grass. But it's not a case of saying we're not going to do it. It's just a case of give us another quarter and we'll revisit it in the new year or end of quarter 4. So it's not a case of no, it's a case of let's see where we stand. And that's what I've seen anyway in terms of clients and people I've been speaking to.
Okay. And I've got a couple more questions before we close. I think we want to try to answer these fairly quick fire to try to finish more or less on time. A question from Alexander. Do you see blockchain technology, or how do you see blockchain technology changing the Esop industry? Laura, maybe this is maybe specifically one for you. I know your company does robotic process automation. Whether the blockchain forms part of that or not, probably not at this stage.
So no, we don't really look at blockchain as far as I'm aware. And to be honest, I don't think I have the expertise to answer that question. I'm afraid, and it's not something I know an awful lot about. So I wouldn't like to comment.
Kevin?
Yeah, not come across too much on blockchain, to be honest. I mean, as part of within the Investec on the digital side, we're talking a lot on that piece, but it's not yet impacted on the share plan space.
Okay, I mean, I'll answer it a little bit from our point of view, I suppose, because we do see blockchain technology as essentially being a distributed ledger, and we've written done a lot of research and written a lot of papers on that. And at that level, yes, blockchain technology could form the underpinnings of an employee share plan well, I would have thought, and provide the security that's needed for the plan. I wouldn't see it as being the first thing on my list of things that blockchain technology companies would be going out to try to market. I would have thought that they would tend to be looking at larger administrative distributed ledger schemes than that. But yes, it would be possible, would be my answer. But the final question from Zoe, which is a fascinating question. Are you planning to change any of your awards? This is, I suppose, for you, Laura, or maybe for you in terms of some of your clients, Kevin, because of the COVID pandemic, or changing any of the performance conditions for current or future awards, or possibly changing the level or dates of grants? Laura, specifically on you for your company, then Kevin, whether you're seeing any of this in your portfolio.
So in terms of Blue Prism, we are not currently making any changes. That is not to say that we won't. So I think part of the reason, so first of all, we have a very kind of flexible share plan, and it's been deliberately drafted that way to give us a bit of freedom if we ever want to do that. To make a few changes. I think what we have done. We first of all, we've continued with our process as we would do. So we made a grant in July to our new starters, which was exactly the same as we would do. We had other plans to make some discretionary awards, which we also made in July. And again, we've just continued our current policy. I do think, however, I don't think it's necessarily out of the question. So our financial year ended October. Basically the last conversations that I had with our HR team when we were discussing the share plans policy, we all agreed that we would obviously look at what our options are at the moment. But the issue is that things are changing so quickly, is that we couldn't possibly make a decision now on what we're going to do, at the end of the year. So our next kind of grant time would be January. So we're just simply too far out. So I think we do have a number of options that we've looked at. At the moment, everything is going to stay exactly the same as it is. We're not going to change anything. But I think, we will have to, as we get closer to the time, we will have to make a decision on what we're going to do. But I just think for us as a company, we're still too far out from the date when we're going to press the button on anything. To make a decision at this time.
Yeah, Kevin.
So that's a really good question, Zoe. I have been chatting to some companies, and they certainly have been concerned about, I suppose, the quantum of awards based on the reduced share prices. So they definitely have been some concerns. We've not really been involved directly on a lot of performance conditions, but certainly we are seeing a lot more holding periods being put in. So I'm presuming that, people are looking to put share plans in and executives in for the long haul, but it's all part of the executive remuneration piece, to just reflect kind of what's been part of the legislation.
Sorry, something that I should have said is the only one change that we're looking at is, so at the moment we do like a percentage, so an individual will get a percentage of their salary, and that will be converted into shares. Something that we're looking at from a dilution perspective, just to really keep our dilution under control, whilst we're going through some volatile times, with everybody's share prices, is changing it into a number of shares. So an individual, instead of getting, say for example, 5% of their salary, they would get 1,000 shares. But for us, that is simply just a measure to help us keep our dilution under control, rather than because of anything to do with the share plan itself.
Yeah. Laura, Kevin, that was wonderful. Thank you very much indeed. We've done questions and comments. I would just like to do some thanks before we close off. In the first instance, some thanks again to the Esop Centre members and to the FS Club members and sponsors for your generosity and forbearance to let us do these webinars. We're truly grateful to all of you. I'd also like to thank the audience for your attention. You've been incredibly attentive. We see stats on your attentiveness, and you have been a very attentive audience today. So thank you for coming, and thank you for being so attentive. Just very, very briefly to give you a little bit more information about the Esop Centre itself and Esop Centre resources. We have a plethora of resources available to you at the Esop Centre. There is Newspad, which is I think a wonderful monthly publication that tells you everything you want to know about what's happening in employee share ownership, but we're afraid to ask, and even some of the things that you weren't afraid to ask. We also have a large number of bulletins on a myriad of topics, including employee share ownership, which are available through the website, through subscription on the website, and are proving tremendously popular at the moment. Do check those out if you wish. We also, although we are going to be doing fewer webinars over the August period, we do have some more webinars coming up. We have Community Chest on 21st Century Security tomorrow. We have Going Gone on natural history specimens on Thursday, and next week we have 2 more webinars coming up, including another webinar on employee share ownership with David Craddock, and another opportunity to see me, if you can bear it, on the 14th of August. But the really big thank you is to our guests today, Laura and Kevin. Thank you so much for coming along. I found that absolutely fascinating. It's been a real pleasure to meet both of you. Under normal circumstances, there would be a rousing round of applause coming up from the audience. We can't do that today. Instead, I thought the maracas, instead of the audience, one for each of you. Laura, Kevin, both of you, thank you very, very much indeed. And again, thanks to everybody for coming along. We hope to see you again very, very soon. Goodbye.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks,
Thank
Ian.
you. Bye.